Hey, what's up guys, it's Nick2, and today I'm going to be showing you guys the updated best Trickster build that I've ever used in the entire game that is just absolutely broken. In my previous Trickster video, I speculated that you could probably do around like 100 million damage per shot around Apocalypse Tier 37. Well, you can actually do well over 125 million damage per shot at only Apocalypse Tier 36, which kind of just goes to show how completely ridiculous the pure damage is with this build, and there simply isn't a single other Trickster build capable of doing so much damage in such a short period of time. The damage is so high in fact that you can literally use any weapon that you want and still just completely dumpster everything. So if you prefer to use a shotgun, pistol, SMG, whatever your preference is, you can just slap it on and still insta-kill everything because the build is just so strong inherently. Not only can the build just do absurd amounts of single target damage, but you can also pretty much one-shot entire maps by just using your timer skill because of how much pure anomaly power we're stacking with the build, which is going to enable timer to just instantly kill everything for us. Additionally, you can get some pretty solid survivability with the build if you play with it properly and take advantage of some survivability mods, which I'll of course go over. Trickster has literally never had a build this strong, and I'm super excited to show it to you guys. Before I get into the video, I want to give a big thanks to HelloFresh, which is back sponsoring another video. If you guys don't know what that is, HelloFresh is an extremely convenient meal service plan that is going to ship super affordable, pre-portioned, amazing quality ingredients straight to your door. It's going to let you cook a fantastically delicious meal super quickly without the hassle of, going to the store, buying tons of ingredients for just one meal, often forgetting something, or having to buy like such a large portion of ingredients just for one meal. That's honestly what's perfect about HelloFresh. You just don't have to worry about any of that. All you have to do is just take the ingredients out of the box and have a blast cooking these very easy to follow, step-by-step recipes because the meals are just going to be portioned perfectly for you. HelloFresh also offers veggie, pescatarian, and fit and wholesome meals so that it's super easy to stick to your health goals. Best part though is that with the prices averaging out to less than $10 a meal, HelloFresh is an absolute no-brainer. Personally for me, being able to cook a super tasty meal every single night without having to worry about going to the store, getting all the ingredients, stressing out about meat and vegetables going bad, what I have in my fridge, etc. It's just an absolute godsend, and I couldn't recommend it more. As a content creator, it helps me save so much time, and it works well with my schedule, and I'd highly recommend that you guys try it out for yourself. If you're interested, make sure to use my link or go to hellofresh.com and use code POGNICJuly16 for 16 free meals across 7 boxes, plus 3 free gifts. Once you click, my description will live update to count up the purchases. Thanks again to HelloFresh for sponsoring this video. Alright, let's just jump into it really quickly. If anybody is interested in getting help with setting up a build, farming, anything along those lines, please feel free to email me at nick2biz@gmail.com. If you need help, again, setting up a perfect build or farming out Apocalypse Tiers, certain loot, etc., please feel free to hit me up. Alright, getting into the skills, pretty standard for Trickster. Going to be using Hunt the Prey, Time Rift, and Twisted Rounds. Twisted Rounds obviously is the main crux of the build. Basically, we are converting a whole bunch of anomaly power into firepower, and then we are taking advantage of that by using Twisted Rounds and just doing a whole bunch of damage, paired with a whole bunch of other things stacking our anomaly power in the first place. But Twisted Rounds also converts anomaly power into firepower by default, so we're able to kind of take advantage of this conversion happening twice with Twisted Rounds. We'll of course talk about that later in the video. Also, highly recommend sticking around until the end of the video, because if you don't, you will not understand how to use the build and you will do pretty much no damage, which is no bueno. So definitely stick around until the end of the video, and everything will be timestamped, so feel free to skip ahead if you would like. When it comes to the other two skills, Hunt the Prey is pretty much mandatory, just going to instantly reload our weapon with a certain mod, so pretty much mandatory, and the mobility is very good. It's also going to give us shield every time we use it, which is very synergistic with the gear set we're using. And then we have Time Rift for our Deception skill. You want to use a Deception skill for multiple different reasons, which I'll of course go over later, but the other option is Venator's Knife. A lot of people in my previous video were just like, yeah, I prefer to use Venator's Knife and I think that it's better. I'm going to go out and just say that it is objectively worse. There's a mod that makes you do 30% extra damage to enemies that are marked with Venator's Knife. A lot of people misread this. It is when they are marked, so it's only going to do extra damage upon the first shot while they still have the knife icon above them. But past that, the 30% extra damage doesn't actually do anything, and Time Rift is of course the entire reason that we're able to just clear out entire maps. You literally just pop it down and it does a whole bunch of damage. But it's also fairly good for bossing because a certain mod that we're using does a pretty good amount of damage paired with it. So yeah, Venator's Knife also doesn't really have much application in AoE scenarios unless you were to use like a ton of mods for it. The only reasonable application that I see for Venator's Knife is using it with Boomerang Blades plus that other mod that I was talking about that gives you 30% extra damage, and then using it with a pump shotgun, which is just infinitely worse than using literally Time Rift plus any other gun in the entire game. So that is my opinion on that. Feel free to do whatever you want, but Time Rift is definitely the play. When it comes to the skill tree, I have changed one thing. The one thing that I changed from my previous one was I took out 1 point of concentration and put it into Arms Trick for the 15% flat close range damage. Very, very, very difficult to test with this build. I think that this is better. It should be better. I mean, 15% close range damage versus the AP should be better because we're already stacking so much AP, so this extra 10% actually isn't crazy, and getting the extra 15% just flat damage as a multiplier should be pretty good. Everything else with the tree, I mean, literally just copy paste it. If you want to use shotguns, you can just take 1 point out of Assault Master and put it into Shotgun Master instead. And we're using Anomaly Scything here because we're going to be activating our melee to increase our anomaly power. But if you don't really want to bother with the melee, you could take that point out there and you could just go into Skill Leech or something like that. Or just put the extra point into concentration for the extra anomaly power there. When it comes to the Pax Tree, this is very important. We get Trigger Man, increase our damage for each skill on cooldown, which is very good and synergizes well with the mod that we're going to be using. Lies Deception is going to give us a whole bunch of extra shield whenever we use our Deception skill, which pairs perfectly with our Shield Beast gear set. Then we're going to be using a Failsafe gear set. Is it called the gear set in this game? I'm talking like it's Division 2, dude. Failsafe Protocol is just a little cheat death, not a big deal. And we get Power Overwhelming, which is going to increase our firepower based on our anomaly power when using an assault weapon. A lot of people would assume that this is going to pigeonhole you into using an assault weapon. Two things about this. First, this breaks all the time, so if you return to lobby and you load back in, sometimes this node literally will stop working. One way that you can test this is, right now you can see that my my firepower is higher than my anomaly power. If your firepower is ever lower or equal to your anomaly power, that means that that 40% node is not working unless you're using a shotgun, for example. So with a shotgun, I'm not taking advantage of that node. And this one, you can see it has anomaly enhancement on it, and my firepower is way lower than my anomaly power because I'm not able to take advantage of that Pax Tree node. But if I put back on my SMG, it's an assault weapon, so I'm able to take advantage of that. That's a good way that you can tell if it's broken, and if you want to fix it, you just literally put the points back in. Otherwise, I mean, this is pretty much mandatory if you're going to be using assault weapon because it's going to pair with Perpetuum Trickery. Every time that we get a crit, it's going to increase our anomaly power, which is on its own multiplier for anomaly power stacking. So this enables us to get a whole bunch of extra AP and is incredibly good. And then next to that, we're getting activating damage skills, increases our assault weapon damage. Not a big deal because it only lasts for 7 seconds, so not too focused on it, but it is helpful for boss killing very quickly, I suppose. But getting the extra AP is really what's important here, and you don't have to have an assault weapon for Perpetuum Trickery to work. But like I mentioned earlier, the build does so much flat damage, you literally do not have to use an assault weapon at all. As long as you have the right stuff set up, you could use any weapon that you want. When it comes to the Ascension Tree here, first off, you want to go for anomaly power, and then you want to go for, anomaly damage, and then anomaly power, and then close range damage, and then damage against elites, and then if you're landing crits, go crit damage. If you're not landing crits, you could go for resistance pierce if you're using certain resistance pierce conversion stuff. Outside of that, you could go for more survivability in the form of like weapon leech. You could go for some skill leech, which pairs very nicely with a little bit of pain and time rift. Status power if you're using vulnerable on the gun, and everything else is kind of just whatever you want. Magazine size is actually fairly nice as well, especially for bossing. Alright, let's talk about guns, and then we'll talk about all the mods. There's actually a good amount of mod options, so I'm going to do my best to cover everything, and I'll give you guys a priority list of what you can use when I'm done talking about the mods, and a different reason to use different sorts of mods. There's a lot of combinations, like I said. When it comes to the weapons, like I said at the beginning of the video, you can use literally anything that you want as long as you have 2 mods. These 2 mods are Anomaly Enhancement and Mage's Rage. Mage's Rage gives you a whole bunch of extra AP. It is not just 40%, it is a multiplier on top of everything else, and we have so much extra additional percentage of AP, with Shield Beast giving us upwards of 100% anomaly power, Mage's Rage giving us a whole bunch, and then we have all the percentage within our skill tree, such as counter shield, combat shield timeline. I never even read these. These give us literally 100% AP by default, and then Perpetuum Trickery giving us another 50%. Everything kind of just multiplies on top of itself, so Mage's Rage ends up effectively giving us significantly more than just 40%. And then Anomaly Enhancement is, of course, to convert a lot of that anomaly power into firepower. Without these 2 things, your damage is going to be pretty bad. Luckily, though, the Final Penance always rolls with these 2 mods on them, so if you're not able to find, for example, a Torturer with Mage's Rage on the bottom, or a perfect Tactical AR with Mage's Rage, or Anomaly Enhancement on the bottom, or a Death Shield with Mage's Rage / Anomaly Enhancement on the bottom, you get what I'm saying. You could just use the Final Penance in place of it. When it comes to which weapon is actually the best, so mathematically, in terms of just doing as much damage per second, an SMG and a purple tactical variant AR are the single best weapons that you can use. Typically, an SMG is going to be a lot easier for most people, and this is what I'd recommend because it's just much more consistent. But if you want to hit really big numbers, the tactical AR is your go-to. But it is very difficult to get a good tactical AR. There's a ton of different weapon options because literally anything works with the build. The Torture, I think, is the single best SMG in the game, unless you can get like a perfect purple one, because it's going to roll with crit damage, close range damage, and then you can get vulnerability bullets on it, which is another 15% extra damage. And then mine has Mage's Rage plus Anomaly Enhancement. Very, very good option there. The Final Penance is pretty good. I use this for mobbing because Embalmer's Rage really helps with getting those Mage's Rage stacks up, especially when you're just like hip fire spraying with the double gun and not really trying to, go super aimbot mode. It's very, very nice. And I really like using the double gun for ad clear because you can just spray and pray with it, and it actually has decent range, while an SMG doesn't really have all that much range. The TAC AR is mathematically the single best weapon for boss damage, while the SMG is like slightly behind it, but you can make an argument that the SMG is better depending on your crit multipliers and all this other stuff. Doesn't really matter all that much. Use whatever your preference is. It's very difficult to get a good purple tactical AR. Mine has Shield Maiden, which is surprisingly really good and gives you a lot of shield. Just make sure that you get crit damage and close range damage. That is very important. And then you can use anything else that you want. If you want to use a shotgun, the Evening Star is a fairly good option. If you want to use a normal AR, I mean, Time Ripper's okay. There's a ton of different options here. Literally just use whatever you want. When it comes to the third mod, like I mentioned earlier, I have Embalmer's Rage for the ad clear. Vulnerability bullets on the Torture is pretty nice for flat damage. Shield Maiden gives you a whole bunch of extra shield, so it's really good for survivability and just consistency and having Shield Beast procced all the time. Dark Sacrifice is technically the single best if you're trying to just do as much damage as possible. Death Renome on the Evening Star is pretty good. Gives you a good amount of extra AP, but it's not too synergistic because we want to put our skills on cooldown. Fortress is good for survivability and additional damage. And any other mod that is going to apply a status, and then you could use something like Bullet Kindling or Euthanizer if you're applying like Toxic or whatever, that's also a good option. Literally just use anything that you can. Just make sure that you get Mage's Rage and Anomaly Enhancement, because if you don't, your build is kind of going to suck. Alright, going into the gear, so you want 3 pieces of Shield Beast like I mentioned, and the 3 pieces that you want are going to be the helmet, the chest, and the pants. Unfortunately, the pants, gloves, and boots all roll with Venator's Knife mods, which means that if you were to use them, you're going to just have to deal with having one dead mod. It's perfectly fine with the build. I just have Trophy on the pants, and I just deal with the dead mod. The chest, helmet, and pants are the best because they're all going to have anomaly power, but also the helmet and the chest actually have mods that are good for us. Like I mentioned, I'm going to go over a priority list of all the mods toward the end of the video, so feel free to just skip to that if you're interested. But these are all the mods that I have set up. Currently, I have 2 different versions of the build. I use one for mobbing, and then I just swap my gloves for bossing, and there's a lot of different options that you have when it comes to the mods. For the helmet, I have Strong Twist, which is absolutely mandatory, and luckily it just rolls natively on the helmet here. And then I have Instant Reload, very, very good. Instantly just going to replenish our entire magazine every single time that we use Hunt the Prey. Pretty much mandatory mod right there. And then we have Dead Clock, which is surprisingly very good, does not get affected by diminishing returns, and this is going to just increase our flat weapon damage by 16% pretty much. It's its own separate multiplier, so it's very good. And for the chest piece, I have Arms and Anomaly, which is one of the single best mods for this build because it just increases our AP by a flat amount that is very, very high. And of course, with all of our additional percentages of AP, we're scaling this very high. Then we have Skull Piercer on the chest. Skull Piercer is kind of a bad mod. Honestly, if I could get rid of it, I would, but it rolls natively on the chest, and the other mod, I think, is like pretty garbage. So not a big deal there. And then I have Captain Hunter, which is very, very good. 16% extra damage against elites. Nothing to complain about. Then on the pants, I have Anomaly Echo, very, very good for the same reason that an Arms Anomaly is good. It's just like almost half the value, so not as good as Arms Anomaly, but still very good, just a lot of extra AP. Then we have Trophy, which is dead mod. Then a little bit of Pain, which is the thing that's going to enable our Time Rift to just completely decimate maps and just kill enemies near instantly. As we stack our Anomaly power, you can get upwards of like 20 million or whatever. The amount of damage that this does is like 20 million per tick, and it's very, very good. One thing that you might notice is that Anomaly Echo actually has firepower and AP on it, so you'd assume that it's probably like the best mod because we're getting both AP and firepower. Actually doesn't really work that way. Firepower mods are incredibly bad with this build, and you really only care about getting flat anomaly power, because when we get flat anomaly power, we're pretty much scaling that up with all these different multipliers by like 300%, right? And then we are then converting that into firepower. So the extra firepower here is literally like 1/30th the value or whatever of the AP, and our firepower is going so high, upwards of like 20 million or whatever, that the extra 286k is like literally 1% of that. So it is actually completely insignificant and doesn't help our damage like at all. So do not go for flat firepower mods. Don't put on Sharp Eye. Don't put on anything like that, because it'll just be heavily affected by diminishing returns to the point where it just does literally 0 damage. Tangent aside, I have my gloves are actually pretty good, and I've managed to get a lot of good gloves. If you want to know how to get some good purples, which this build heavily relies on, feel free to check out my previous video going over that. But for my gloves, I have Time Rift Range, which is very, very good for ad clear and pretty much mandatory. And then Ammo Bargain, which is also good for ad clear. Whenever I get a kill, it's going to reset some of my ammo. You don't really need this at all, especially if you're using like a double gun or even like an LMG. You don't really need it, but it is nice for just consistency. You can just hold down left click, but it is good to use your Hunt the Prey frequently to get that extra multiplier from all the extra AP. Then I have Personal Space, which is just a lot of extra damage. Like I mentioned earlier, I actually swap out my gloves to these Anomaly Caliber gloves here that have close range and AP. By the way, you want your purples to have Anomaly Power and close range. I think close range is the most important thing there, but Anomaly Power might slightly outscale it. Anyway, for my gloves, I just swap to these other pairs so that whenever I'm fighting a boss, because Time Rift Range doesn't help me when I'm fighting a boss, neither does Ammo Bargain. So I just swap to these that has Anomaly Caliber and Resistance Piercer. And when you get Anomaly Caliber and Resistance Piercer and Unstoppable Force, and you convert all this Resistance Piercing into extra AP and extra critical damage, you get a whole bunch of extra damage. You can also use Achilles Heel to further convert that Resistance Piercing into even more crit damage, and that actually stacks with Resistance Piercer. So you can get 60% extra critical damage just with those two mods. I guess 3 technically, with Anomaly Caliber, and that's really good. This segues into what I use on my boots, which is, again, Anomaly Power close range damage. Mine aren't APOC, because getting these are incredibly, incredibly difficult, because the only APOC mod you actually want that's good would be Unstoppable Force on the bottom. I literally went and found a vendor and bought blue boots, and then I just upgraded it, and I got Dum Dum Bullets on it. Dum Dum Bullets is one of the best mods with this build too, because it is on its own multiplier, so just 12% extra damage, which is very, very strong. And then Unstoppable Force just converts some of our Resistance Piercing into extra Anomaly Power. Not particularly good when you don't have Anomaly Caliber on. I really wouldn't use it unless you're using Anomaly Caliber. I'd probably swap this to Power Assimilation, but I do like to just swap my gloves to this pair whenever I'm fighting a boss, and when you're ad clearing, you don't really need all that extra damage in the first place. Real quick, I'll go over what I think the priority of the mods are, and then I'll talk about some other mods that you guys can use that are pretty good, especially some survivability ones. So when it comes to the prior, I think Instant Reload is the most important so that you actually have ammo to use the build. Strong Twist converts more of your AP into firepower, so that's pretty much mandatory. Arms Anomaly gives a whole bunch of AP, a little bit of pain, and Time Rift Range are pretty much mandatory for mobbing, because this enables you to just kill everything. But of course, they aren't really going to help you for bossing. Dum Dum Bullets gives you a whole bunch of extra damage, Anomaly Echo, then Dead Clock, then Captain Hunter, and then pretty much everything else that I include in the next section of this. I didn't really mention Skull Piercer because it's just going to roll natively on the chest, and it's not really that good of a mod anyways. For the rest of the mods, for survivability, Self-Medication and Damage Absorber are very, very strong. Self-Medication instantly full heals you. Damage Absorber just gives you a lot of damage reduction by default, but also, I mean, you have so much survivability with the build anyway. As long as you just make sure to use your Time Rift for the extra shield, that you should be chilling. For other flat damage mods, Power Assimilation is very good for just extra AP, as well as for mobbing. If there's a whole bunch of elites on the field, to get a lot of extra damage with that. Personal Space is just good for flat extra damage. Ammo Bargain is good for ammo when mobbing. Anomaly Caliber is good to give your Twisted Rounds extra Resistance Piercing. Pair that with Unstoppable Force for more Anomaly Power, Achilles Heel, and Resistance Piercer for flat extra crit damage. It's kind of difficult to gauge how good each individual mod is. This build is incredibly difficult to test, and doing the math is like kind of all over the place, and I'm kind of fed up with doing all the testing and stuff. So I don't know, you guys shouldn't see too big of a difference between, you know, which of these mods to use first. Just follow the initial priority list and then just add on any of these extra mods that I mentioned, and you should be perfectly fine. Also, feel free to add in any status mod that you want if you're able to get like T3 Burn or T3 Toxic or whatever on your gun. Alright, so now let's get into how you actually want to use the build, which is incredibly important, because if you don't use it properly, you're going to do pretty much 0 damage. In my previous video, I already explained snapshotting decently well, so I would recommend just watching that so I don't have to re-explain everything, and then I would come back to this to learn the absolute perfect boss rotation, which I'm going to be going over right now, but it's also how to actually get the perfect snapshot. Again, I explained what snapshotting is in my previous video. I'll leave a link to it at the top right, and also I'll leave a link in the description, which is going to be timestamped, so you can just go to that video and learn how to snapshot right there and understand what it is, because otherwise the rest of this is going to be pretty difficult to understand. So there's a lot of different ways that you can actually snapshot. Sorry, my clip is like really laggy right here. I don't really know why. my OBS kind of died. There's a lot of different ways that you can actually snapshot. There's multiple different ways to take advantage of it. Ultimately, you just want to make sure that you get all of your multipliers before you ever activate your Twisted Rounds. That is the most important thing. So right here, I'm using what I call the Rambob strat. If you don't know Rambob, check him out on Twitch. He does a lot of speedruns. He set up the build, and then he pretty much found a way to pretty consistently get a really good snapshot that is very quick on the boss. So at least in this example, I'm going to show you how to do it very quickly, but ultimately, fundamentally, like the only thing that matters is getting all of your multipliers stacked up before you actually activate your Twisted Rounds, and this is what I'm doing in this boss clip. So when I'm in the black screen, I activate my Time Rift so that I get a little bit of shield going. Also, it's on cooldown, which is then going to increase my anomaly power and stuff. And then immediately after my Time Rift, I'm going to hunt the prey, and then I'm going to melee him right in the back. Previously, I was going all for all my headshots, and then I was meleeing, but it's actually way better to get all of this extra AP before you go for the headshots, because Mage's Rage actually scales based on how much AP you already have. It's going to scale on top of all of your multipliers. So you want to activate Mage's Rage at the absolute, like pretty much as the last thing that you do. So you want to time Rift for all that shield that's going to happen pretty much over time, instantly hunt the prey, and then melee, and that gives you a whole bunch of extra AP. And then you kind of want to follow him and then go for all of your headshots. Then once you get all of your headshots, you can recast your Time Rift and your Hunt the Prey to get all those extra multipliers again. And then right when you're on his back, this is also going to pretty much fill up your shield, which is kind of the main reason you're doing that. And then right when you're on his back, you can instantly Twisted Rounds, and then you have pretty much maximum snapshot, and then the guy just gets completely melted. Multiple different ways to do this. If you don't want to do everything very quickly, you could easily just like wait for the boss to come to you, and then you could just like wait for him to leap over here. You could Time Rift and then hunt the prey, and then just melee, land all the headshots, and then pop your Twisted Rounds immediately. You pretty much do the recast to get maximum shield here, and it's just up to you, you know, how you kind of want to do it and most comfortable. And the Arbiter kind of flies all over your screen all the time, so it's really annoying. Literally just make sure that you get the Time Rift, you have like a decent amount of shield, you get the Hunt the Prey, you get the melee, and you get the headshots after all of those things. I wouldn't really worry about doing it perfectly because, I mean, as you can see, the guy just gets like completely decimated. But obviously, the better that you do it and the more that you get used to it, you will end up doing more damage. When it comes to how you want to do it for mobbing, pretty much just do the same thing. Just make sure that you use your Time Rift, make sure that you use your Hunt the Prey, make sure you get a melee, land some headshots afterward, and then you can just pop your Twisted Rounds. Don't really worry about, you know, absolutely maximizing it because you'll do so much damage anyway. It's not really all that big of a deal. Hopefully all that makes sense. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to leave it down in the comments. If you enjoyed, please make sure to drop a like and subscribe. I'm close to 150k subs, so it would be nice to get to that, but not a big deal. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys later. Peace.